Prynhawn da, a croeso I gyfarfod Pwyllgor Addysg. Good afternoon and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Education Scrutiny Committee on the 18th of September 2025. I am Councillor Rebecca Phillips and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we move on with the Chair's announcements, the first one is that we would like to thank Marie Caddick for her work on the committee. Marie has resigned. And also some councillors have left us for other committees, so I'd like to thank them for their work as well. Councillor Phil Rogers, Councillor Dennis Keogh and Councillor Rydian Maisen. And welcome onto the committee, croeso mawr, Councillor Josh Tuck, and also Councillor Reynolds missed us so much that she's come back on the Education Scrutiny Committee, so croeso i'r ddau ohonoch chi. So before we move on, I'd just like to remind you that this meeting will be recorded. Please can you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. When asked to raise your hand, can members who are virtually viewing this meeting raise your electronic hand, and members who are in the room, please raise your physical hand. I wish to remind members signing in remotely of their legal obligation to have their cameras switched on during the meeting, please, in order to be seen and heard whilst participating in council business. Officers are reminded that they are free to leave the meeting following their item. We are not due to have a fire drill, so should the fire alarm sound during the meeting, please make your way to the nearest exit. For the purpose of the recording, I will hand over to our Democratic Services Officer to confirm attendance in the meeting room. Diolch.
Good afternoon, members. In the meeting room, we have John Burge, Chris Millis, Councillor Neath Jenkins and Councillor Bob Woolford. Myself, I'm the chair. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Pamela. Moving on to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest today, please?
See any, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. You will see the minutes attached at pages 5 to 12 of your agenda pack. If you feel that these minutes are an accurate record of the meeting, can I please have a proposer and a seconder?
I'll propose, Chair.
Anyone happy to second, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch yn fawr. If members do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that these minutes are approved.
Chair, I can see no indication to the contrary, so these minutes are approved.
Diolch yn fawr. Agenda item 4. There are no items to consider from the Cabinet Forward Work Programme today. So we'll move on to agenda item 5. Consider the reports as selected by this committee for consideration. The first item being 5A, pupil attendance update. This report is for monitoring, but this is the report that we have selected as a scrutiny committee. Please can officers provide a brief introduction to the report? Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is the pupil attendance in Neath Talbot 24-25 academic year, and it shows improvements in both primary and secondary sectors, continuing a positive trend since the pandemic, although rates remain below pre-COVID levels in the majority of our schools. The local authority and schools have implemented various measures to support attendance and address persistent absence, with external inspection recognising these efforts. In our recent Estin inspection, this area was praised by inspectors and our officers, so I thank them for that. John and I are here to take any questions, and I'll hand over to John now.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair. As Chris has said, really, attendance has been increasing year on year for the last 5 years since the COVID pandemic. The academic year 24-25 saw attendance in both primary and secondary sectors increase by there or thereabouts a full percentage point. And as I've mentioned to members before, attendance in schools generally either crawls forwards or backwards by fractions of points. So to achieve a full percentage point is an absolute achievement. It's a significant improvement. What I can't tell you today is how we compare to other local authorities, because that data on a national basis hasn't been released yet. Secondary data is normally released late autumn, and primary data then is released around about Christmas time, maybe January. It depends how quick Welsh Government can vet the information, can cleanse it then and then publish it. So I can't give you that today. But I'll certainly be bringing a report back to you in the spring term, and we'll contain that information then. Other information for you, really, our attendance support officers. I flagged the good work that they do to you, I think the last meeting I was in, and we also had a discussion at the time about how the grant causes me contractual difficulties with staff. And however, over the summer, I've lost all 4 of them. 2 of them I lost because they went to other local authorities for permanent jobs, and 2 of them because we've lost on a secondment basis to other jobs in the directorate. So as of the summer, I had no attendance support officers. We've recruited 2 new ones, and they start next week. But we despite putting the advert out twice, we are still struggling to recruit another 2. And we are creeping towards the point almost where it becomes fruitless to undertake a recruitment exercise because the grant is only in being until March. By the time the advert goes out, you shortlist, you interview, you go through the pre-employment checks, the DBSs and the references, then someone gives a month's notice if it's somewhere else, and you do the induction when they start. If the grant isn't going to be continued, effectively, you're only getting a couple of weeks worth of work out of them. It's always that inevitable position you're in. Is the grant continuing next year? And I know there's no answers from this table. I get that. And I know senior officers like our director, they flag that up frequently to Welsh Government. And I know that frustration is shared across Wales as well. But that's where we stand with attendance support officers. And ASOs were picked up. The work of ASOs were specifically picked up as part of the Estyn inspection, because they act as that level between the school trying to address attendance efforts, which is normally up to the 90% level. EWOs picking up entrenched cases, persistent absenteeism cases, as the ASOs are almost like the bit of the jam in between the sandwich there, where they would pick up cases that were sliding down, but before they became a full referral to the education welfare officer, where they would stand on the gates, where they would meet parents, where they would be on the phone to them first thing in the morning, where they would encourage lateness rather than non-attendance. We'd rather get him in at 10 o'clock and not get him in at all, and then we can work on trying to get him in on time tomorrow. So yeah, the role of ASO is really important, and I want to get back to that as quickly as we can. Over on the back, the page 16 on your report, I've given you the extract from the Estyn inspection. Really positive. There was no surprise they were going to pick on us to talk about attendance, and I got exclusions coming up as well. There was no surprise there. However, I have to say, I was delighted with the outcome of the Estyn inspection. They recognised the hard work that schools, that officers, of the Education Welfare Service have put in, the scrutiny that members give to attendance. I'm always here. You're always asking me questions about attendance and what we can do better. And Estyn have recognised that we've got a long way to go, but we're on the right path, and that's all we can ask for. So to me, what I'm bringing you today is a good news story, but recognising we've still got progress that we must continue with.
Thank you, Chair.
Great, diolch yn fawr. So we have got some questions from Pryd, and Councillor Wilford, please.
Thank you, Chair. You sort of preempted my question. I was asking about the percentages against our schools. Are they above or below national average? You've said obviously you haven't got other authorities to compare that at the moment. I was just interested how well we were doing in comparison to the rest of the country.
Up to now, yeah, you're right. For this year, I can't give you the answer because I just don't know. Up to now, history has shown us over the last 10 years, we are below the average. And I think we're probably going to be in the lower half, if I'm honest. I'd be delighted if we're above. Although, having said that, secondary sector last year was 15th out of 22 local authorities. So not far off the average. I just hope we can maintain and improve on that last year. The last 3 or 4 years, well, sorry, 3 or 4 years as we came out of COVID, so about 2 or 3 years ago, we were struggling to get off 21st position. And then last year, then we made significant progress up the rank orders. But it'll be Christmas-ish time before I know where we are this year.
Thank you.
Well, Yes, obviously it's great to see an improvement in attendance figures, 1% in primary and, just short of that really in secondary, which is really good, even though, we're not at the pre-COVID levels apart from Ysgol Gynradd Cwm Neath. So I'm just, obviously, congratulations to them. And I'm just wondering, if they're doing anything differently, can they share any best practices with other schools across the authority?
Yeah, and that's a good question to ask. In a way, I'm chuffed in one way, and I'm a little bit disappointed in another way, because last academic year, as you know, we get monthly data on attendance from our schools. And through various months of the year, we saw a number of schools that had breached or gone through that barrier of pre-COVID. They'd achieved it. But at the end of the academic year, when all of the data for the full, 12 months, but children not in for 12 months, the whole academic year was added all up, it was only Cwm Neath Welsh School that had achieved enough positive attendance to break through the 2018-2019 data that they had that was specific for their school. But throughout the year, some schools did bob their heads up above that line. I am confident this year, I shouldn't say it maybe, but I am hopeful this year several schools are going to break through that barrier, and this time next year when I report to you, I'm hoping to see quite a number of schools on that list. As to Cwm Neath specifically, I passed on our congratulations to the head teacher and to the governors and the staff there. It is a time of celebration for them. I've asked them as well also that they've achieved one milestone. That's not the end of it. Now we've got to make sure we progress even further. And the head teacher came back to me and she said, "John, challenge accepted." And that's what we want. We've always said getting back to pre-COVID dates that's not the end thing. That's just a milestone. Now is to move on even further. We work, our education welfare services work on a cluster basis. So good practice is taken from a variety of schools and that is shared amongst the education welfare service. What we see in one school, we will steal, we will borrow, and we will disseminate that into other schools, and vice versa. Everybody is open up for sharing that good school and school practice, and that will continue. And again, it comes back to Estin that's what they've recognised as what we're doing.
We also recognise, Chair, that only 2 years ago we asked all our schools to make it a development plan priority, and I think that really did help. Up until that, I don't think attendance had featured on many development plans, school development plans, but it does now.
I was just, well, obviously we've got this gap between people sort of preschool on the SEN and pupils. I'm just wondering in Cwm Neath's case what the percentages are like there at the moment.
Oh, it's a good question. I can't answer today. I can certainly get it for you. I don't have the actual split of FSM, non-FSM, and SEN, non-SEN for individual schools today. The gap was there prior to COVID. COVID just came along and the gap was always there, and we were working with our schools to narrow that gap. COVID came along and blew a lot of things out of the water: attendance, exclusions. Gaps were wider than they've been for some time. However, they are now reducing even further again. This is where we then focus some of our attention on specific support, because that's when the ASOs, the attendance support officers, come into the BN. That's where we've got 2 dedicated persistent absenteeism officers, which is worth pointing out, the vast majority of local authorities in Wales don't have. We have decided that we would invest in that particular area a couple of years ago, and that pays huge dividends. So those particular elements of the Education Welfare Service then will focus their efforts on individual children who have that wide gap, and they are able to work with them to narrow them as best we can. Excuse me.
The other thing, Chair, as well. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Attendance of when you've got high levels of free school meal, those young people and families have other issues that they're trying to deal with. High levels of ALN, they'll have issues that they're trying to deal with. So the school themselves have to offer a balanced curriculum to make sure that they're encouraging children to experience school positively. So when you put all that in the mix, we are working to close the gap. But I have to be careful with that phrase. Closing the gap means I could take the best and bring it down. close the gap immediately. So what we're trying to do is
Diolch yn fawr, thank you. Cabinet Member Neath Jenkins, please.
Thank you. Sorry, your questions just prompted me to look at the last Estyn report from Neath. They've actually got free school meal percentage of 20% or 20.1, which isn't the highest in our borough, but it certainly isn't the lowest either. So they have got a significant amount. So their work has been exceptional.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much. It's obviously concerning regarding the attendance support officers, and I know you mentioned that we lost 2 to other local authorities. I was just wondering whether we knew the kind of reasoning behind that.
Yeah,
full-time person.
contracts. They've not gone to be an attendance support officer elsewhere. They've gone to do other work in other local authorities on a permanent basis or a longer term contract, whichever it is. But more than we can offer, which is just until March on an annual basis based on the grant. And I gotta say, I understand that. They young people, they got bills to pay, mortgages to pay, families to feed. I get it.
Councillor Jenkins.
Just coming back on that really, I know I'm on my soapbox again, but yet again, I absolutely despise the grant system. It leaves us in a very vulnerable position. And I think this report has shown how ASOs are instrumental in reducing our problems or pupils that have difficulties in attending school. And we just can't go on like this. So to be honest, if anybody can be in the year of our education minister, which I shall be in November, but I think these grant systems really have to change to give some stability to our staff.
Absolutely. Diolch yn fawr, Leah.
Councillor Tuck has held up his up any longer.
Yes. Councillor Tuck, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask if there was any scope to work with schools in other local authorities and see if we can learn best practice from them as well.
Yeah. Yes. Our education welfare officers have got a good network around Wales where they get together. And a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, this authority, Neath Talbot, hosted the first All Wales Education Welfare Service conference, where we had EWOs coming down from North Wales, West Wales, South Wales. They all gathered here in Neath Talbot. Welsh Government, we were going to pay for that. We had it in the Princess Royal Theatre. Welsh Government recognised that this was something that would benefit the whole of Wales and stepped in and funded it for us. And that was a really good conference and something that's continuing those networks to pick up that good practice that you're referring to. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Jenkins, please.
I think it's important to point out as well, which maybe the officers haven't, we were spotlighted by Estyn about how good our practices were in several areas within education and youth. And we're leading light then, shall I say. You're not blowing your own trumpets, but I think in some areas we are leading the practice within Wales. So very often it's us to share in the good work with them.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Grounds, please.
Oh, hello. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering about the grant system. Is this specific for Neath and Talbot, or does everybody have to go through this grant system in order to keep their staff then? Because, if we're losing these important people, is there any way around it in offering them or getting these grants in earlier?
I can take that, Chair. It's not about the grants themselves would be welcome if they came in earlier and we were nodded to say that they're going to happen again next year. But this particular grant is across Wales. So
Right.
Everyone is in the same boat. And it's very rare that a grant will be turned into a permanent source of income for us to be able to manage. It is a grant, unfortunately, and they come and they go.
Oh, I see. It's just that, can I just ask about, the importance of these jobs, especially for families out in the communities, and some communities are going to be worse than others with the tendencies. And that's the importance of the job, isn't it? Is highlighting it, how important this job is. Thank you.
Yes.
Absolutely. Diolch yn fawr for that. Do we have any other questions on the attendance report, please? See anyone? Okay, so the report is for noting, but obviously as a committee, we'd always looking to scrutinise attendance, and we do thank officers and our schools as well for their work on this matter. So diolch yn fawr I bawb. Moving on to agenda item 5B, pupil exclusions. This report is for monitoring, but also we've requested to scrutinise this as a committee. Can officers please provide a brief introduction, please? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The report provides an overview of pupil exclusion rates in Neath Talbot schools for the 24-25 academic year. It highlights trends, reasons for exclusion, alternative support measures to reduce exclusion rates. And be mindful that when a pupil is excluded, there's often a variety of reasons that sit behind that. It's never straightforward. And I'll hand over to John to add anything new.
Yeah, not much more to add from Chris's introduction there, really. Pupil exclusion rates of the fixed nature and permanent exclusion are down. Permanent exclusions are significantly down. I know we're only talking about 20,000 children. I know we're only talking about 16 last year, but considering 37 the previous year, 47 the previous year before that, it's a fantastic reduction. And that is a testament to the work that schools are doing. You'll know that Welsh Government had the Behaviour Summit last year. So this is a national challenge, a national difficulty with pupil behaviour since COVID, since children have gone back into schools, has been very challenging. So we're not alone by seeing these figures going in the wrong direction originally. But thankfully, they're now coming back down again. Interestingly, girls are, the exclusion rates of girls are far worse than boys and have been the worst for 10 years. That's an interesting issue. Before anybody asks me why, I don't know. Right? I can't answer that.
We are looking into it, but we don't know.
I don't know whether boys' behaviour has significantly improved and is now the spotlight's on girls, or girls' behaviour, and I think it's this one, has significantly got worse. And that's why there's more exclusions of girls. That's my general feeling, but we're still working on getting behind that and drilling down and then trying to do something about it.
And I believe, Chair, that we have now reached pre-pandemic levels in permanent exclusions. It's not something I'm proud of because 17 was too high before COVID, but we now hit 16. We'll see what happens this academic year, and we really take year on year.
Thank you. And I know you share, my thoughts on it. It's always a last resort.
It is always,
authority, isn't it? And
you're right.
I was just wondering in terms of, the alternatives outlined in the report to avoiding the exclusions, that they're made available to everyone and all schools obviously know about them. That's the party.
Absolutely.
Yes.
As soon as we hear about a permanent exclusion, we are in discussion with the school to find the school that's made the permanent exclusion to find out, is there something we can do to halt it, to stop it in its tracks? Do you need extra support? Can we try a managed move? Can we try pastoral support plans? Can we try something else to make you withdraw that permanent exclusion? If that's not a possibility, then we'll start working about an alternative. And there are a number of open options available to us. So you're right to point out, and I should have pointed it out, that a permanent exclusion is the absolute last resort. And immediately before this meeting, I've spent 2 hours with Nash, and that's exact conversation we've just been having, the secondary head teachers. How are we going to manage any exclusions that come our way this year because we've done so well last year? What lessons are we learning, and what type of directions can we go in? We are finding, the Royal We, local authority, working with our secondary colleagues, that holding pupils on courses that are not traditionally classroom based is having a positive. Cabinet Member and I, for example, we went down in July to the celebratory evening at Bulldogs, where they were congratulating the pupils who'd been on alternative placements. So these are some children where traditional classroom-based education isn't suitable. And a year ago, 18 months ago, these were children who were permanently excluded. And we were at the point of just moving them to another school. But instead of doing that, we invested in them and moved them to alternative provisions. That has paid dividends in certain circumstances. They've gone out, they've got real life skills. They've learned some basics maybe that their peers learned a long time ago, but they hadn't, and they were getting embarrassed in the classroom. They felt they couldn't cope in the classroom, so they were having more individual attention. And the stories we were hearing from the parents was just incredible. They were thanking us for the work that we had done, and it wasn't the work that we had done, we just made it happen. It was the work of the provisions that we were doing, because they were seeing differences in their children. Well, we both came away from it, didn't we, Councillor Jenkins? And we were buzzing, weren't we?
I do think as well, Chair, that a huge amount of effort has gone into the pre-exclusion model to stop those children going down that slope in the first place. And that's with working with families, working with our system within our offices, working with our schools. I do think the pastoral support teams of all our schools should be praised as well, the work they're doing with families, because behind the child, it's often the family have other issues that they need support with, to see education as important rather than something that, well, you know, if you are, you are. So I think some of our young people have really learned, and if we can keep going down and giving them more skills opportunities rather than pure academic possibilities, we'll see our NEAT figures continue to come down.
Councillor Jenkins, please.
Just to add to what John was saying, really, yes, I mean, the work, some of the young people that we saw in the Bulldogs in the celebratory evening were quite open about the fact that they didn't engage with school, but a lot of the times the certificates they got there, and they were life skill certificates of developing themselves as well-rounded human beings. They were quite possibly the first time they'd ever been awarded anything for their behaviour, and the change in them was just amazing, which brings me back to grants again, and we're back in the same situation.
Yeah, very difficult, isn't it? Sorry, Councillor Woolcock, you did have a question in pre-briefing, so
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's on the pastoral support programmes. Obviously, it's great to have that in place, and I know that it's multi-agency. My question was, do we have kind of champions in the schools who lead this, or is there a blanket kind of training for all teachers to recognise and point these support programmes in the right directions?
I think the answer is both, to be honest. I think all staff are made aware of what benefits can result in a PSP. And then there's certain staff, such as the ANCO, pastoral lead, they have additional support and training on why a PSP would be suitable for one young person, but possibly not another. And each PSP is unique to that child. It's not a standardized system. Some of our young people come in first thing in the morning and can stay 2 hours. Some come in at 2 o'clock and stay an hour and a half. Some go home at lunch and come back again. So the PSP has to be bespoke to the child. But the whole point of the PSP is that it slowly, where possible, reduces, and the increased time increases, unless that child is better placed in an alternative provider. And we'll only know that as we try to engage them more and more with their learning. So the schools, the family, the young person, and us as officers play a crucial part with working with social services and health to make sure that young person is getting a life chance. Not necessarily you will go to school for 8 hours a day, no matter what. Some of our young people just can't cope with that, nor should they be punished if they can't cope for it. But our aim is to get every child back to full-time education, I'll use loosely, a full-time support in some manner.
Thank you, Chris.
I think it's also worth pointing out as well, Chris and I sit on the monitoring group.
Yeah.
So every child who has a PSP, the school has to send it in to the local authority. So we keep a close eye on it, and we sit on it with other colleagues, both inside education and out. So we've got some colleagues from social services, senior colleagues that come over as well. And once every half a term, we go through the PSPs and we see whether they're appropriate and whether we allow them to continue, whether they should then, as Chris said, be starting now to be weaned off them, because we don't want children on part-time or reduced timetables long-term. Every child is entitled to a full-time education. The short-term is for reduced hours is for a short-term basis, and we make sure that that's appropriate. So there is a monitoring system already in place in readiness to make sure that they're appropriate.
And that good practice is disseminated. So if one school are doing something in particular, we do share that, but it can sometimes be unique to the child.
So I, one other question around
Yes,
the
yeah.
table, Chair. Yeah, just looking at the tables, there are 3 obvious schools that have very high fixed term exclusions. Is that, what's the specific reason for those 3 schools? Are they specific to those areas, or
Are you in the primary or secondary sector? Because secondary are
in the,
high.
Primary.
it's in the primary
You're in the
sector,
primary,
you've got Blindillis
like
at 15,
Crinout.
Crynast at 13,
Yeah.
and Eastern Primary at 18, which obviously those figures stand out against everything else on the table.
There isn't one answer, Councillor. It is unique to the area, but of course, children can go to any school from any area they wish to. So it isn't just down to the area the school is. One of those schools has a high tariff unit as well, and then there's, you can take into consider high levels of ALN. Then you've got, in one of those schools, there was a lot of refugee support put in, and transient work with gypsy travellers and Romani travellers. So I think at one point, one of our schools had 27 Ukrainian families as well, where there's certain types of behaviour that's acceptable at home but not in school. So all of that together, we're working with those schools, and they haven't taken it lightly, every decision they make, but there isn't a permanent exclusion there associated to them.
No.
So all we ask is that if a child is having fixed term exclusion, what's different for that child when they return to school? What have you done differently? What was the trigger point? Why did they behave that way? And then we'll work with that. And maybe there's an undiagnosed issue that we can work with our ALN colleagues. Maybe it's a family issue. There's a unique situation that's going on at the moment, and it's causing the child to act out or behave differently. It's a possibility that there was a overreaction at the school, and that has been reduced since. So all of these can be a factor for it, but we are working closely with those schools.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yeah.
Councillor Alan Lockyer, please. Diolch.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, John. It's very informative what you're saying. I'm pleased to hear that you've got some excellent strategies to cope with these children. My question really is the permanent exclusions. I mean, I suppose I'm speaking more akin to secondary or comprehensive, but the ones that are not on programmes, are we monitoring children who've been excluded, and in that they might be wandering around? Because where I'm leading that to is that we know that 100% of pupils who are excluded roaming the streets are often picked up with county lines, and we know from our police reports that we have every month, county lines is still very prevalent within our county borough, and in fact is spreading, if anything. So the question is really, is the children who are excluded, are we monitoring every single one of them, or do we know where they are when they're not in school?
I can't honestly tell you, yes, we know exactly where they all are at all the time of the day. That would be wrong of me to say that. What I will say is if a child is excluded from school, say on a permanent basis, during that period, we would engage a tutor to make sure that that child is picking up some sort of education, because there is a period of time where the date that the head teacher makes the permanent exclusion, the time that governors meet as part of the pupil disciplinary committee, then if they upheld that decision, then the parent has got 3 weeks to submit an appeal. Then we got to take time then to arrange the appeal. Then if that fails, we then got to take time to find an alternative provision, another school, in other words, so that from the day that a child is permanently excluded until the day they go back into another mainstream school, in some circumstances, could be several months because of the system and the process. But and in that period, we would then put in tuition, and we make it, we call it home tuition because that's what we've always called it. But the truth is we don't do home tuition anymore. We would put it in a library or in a public place because of safeguarding for both sides. But tuition is put in place. If there are any children walking around Neath during the school day that are not excluded, then our education welfare officers would pick them up because they would be absent from school. And we have already established truancy patrols with the police. And I think we've got one in the diary now coming up in the next couple of weeks in the Neath area. So we've got a double edge there to try and stop this and prevent that happening. But you're absolutely right. We're also concerned with some of the children that are caught up with county lines, and there's a lot of work going on there. And that's what we'll pick up when I bring you a safeguarding report.
Great, well, thanks. Can I just ask one more thing? I'm really pleased to hear working closely with social services, particularly with where perhaps there may be chaotic families, because social services don't walk into homes like your education welfare do. So education welfare, I've always felt they're the first sort of call really of picking things up to social services, because they actually have the authority, if you like, then to go into a home and see particular instances or signs of a chaotic family or chaotic life. So I'm glad to hear that the links with social services are certainly there, but have they improved? Really, is there a case of where our education welfare is really reporting back to social services?
I would definitely say they've improved, Councillor Lockyer, over the last couple of years. There is some good, strong links there. And as individuals become more experienced in their roles and they get to know each other, they get to trust each other, and that just continues then an upward trend about working closer together. At our level, we've got good, strong links with principal officers and heads of service in social services, and at EWO level and officer level, they've got good links to do with each other as well. Always room for improvement. One working in one building and one working in another building doesn't help. It's always great to have those conversations in the corridor. We all know that. But as they stand, in response to your question, have they been improved? Yes, they definitely are.
Great. Good to hear. Thanks very much, John. That's excellent.
Yeah, and Councillor Josh Tuck, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's you've kind of already answered it, that it's a yes, but I just wondered what work is being done to kind of investigate the links between those struggling with mental health conditions and exclusions.
Well, we've got a wellbeing team, and there's nobody here today from the wellbeing team. We've got our education psychologist and an inclusion service, and no doubt they'll be reporting to Scrutiny over the coming months. I'm part of the Forward Work programme, I'm sure, and we can ask them to be quite specific about the work they do in there. But there is some good work there. They've got cynnydd workers based in secondary schools, and
we've also got first aid training happens, and mental health first aid training happens as well. Many of the pastoral support and the teaching assistants. And let's not forget our schools, where appropriate, have a huge amount of contact with these young people and have built up very strong relationships. So they are often aware first that there's an issue with the young person. And likely, we've seen anxiety go through the roof at the moment. Anxiety can mask other issues. But coming out of COVID and we're moving away from that, that's not an excuse anymore. I think COVID is just a reason. For some of these young people, they've missed the last years to their primary and they're now in secondary, so the transition was missed. Others have gone into examinations without having pre-examination practice. So overall, we do expect mental health and anxiety to have increased. However, we have got professionals that are supporting us, and let's not rule out the health service as well. We've got a great relationship with the health service.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really good.
Councillor Jeremy Hurley, please.
Thanks. It was just to give Councillor Lockyer additional information. Myself and Councillor Jenkins attended the youth service sort of strategy event this week, where there were over 80 people interlinked, across the board, across the authority, where that wraparound service of working together and making sure that nobody is missed. I know, and a full sort of support service that was clear to see. And obviously trying to make even more connections and more interworking. So, it seems to be a really, fantastic service that they're providing. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Susan Grams, please.
Oh, I just wanted to bring it back, Jed, to about early years and about, we find in our communities, even from a very young age, that we work with families who might be disenfranchised from an early age, So I think I worked in a school as in health, and I think sometimes if you get a community school whereby you've got health alongside your education, it can actually break down barriers very early on, even when the little ones come into school, because you're highlighting those families that might need help further along. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Neath Jenkins, please.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with that, Susan, and I think that illustrates how important it is that we continue to roll out our early years programmes with Flying Start, because a lot of our pupils with additional learning needs are now being identified before they even start primary school.
Yeah.
And I think the earlier you can get in there, the more impactful it is.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I agree. And our community focused approach and cluster working is really helpful.
Any other questions on pupil exclusions, please? I don't see anyone. This report is for noting. I think we've had a good debate on that. So thank you, officers, again for the information. There are no performance monitoring items for consideration. So we'll move on to agenda item 6. We go through the Cabinet Forward Work Programme and add any further items which members may wish to consider. Pamela, if you could provide us with any updates, please.
Yes, good afternoon, members. All members would have had sight of the Cabinet and Scrutiny Forward Work programmes in the agenda pack. There have been some changes. These are with the agreement of the Chair. So changes to the Scrutiny Forward Work programme. The Q1 Corporate Performance Monitoring Report has moved from today's meeting to the 16th of October. The Q2 Corporate Performance Monitoring Report has moved from the 27th of November to 8th of January. And the Q3 Corporate Performance Monitoring Report has been removed from the 19th of February, and a future date will be confirmed. In agreement with the Chair, the Welsh in Education Annual Report has been added to the Scrutiny Committee Forward Work programme, and that will come to scrutiny on the 16th of October. There's been one report added to the Cabinet Forward Work programme, which is the non-compliant Direct Award Local Good Partnership. I raised that with the Chair, and it's not been selected for scrutiny by the Chair unless members have any reason to select that. And then also there's one report removed from the Cabinet Forward Work programme, which is the Conveyance of Schools Meals Contract. This has been removed as it no longer needs Cabinet approval. So that's been removed from the Forward Work programme. So those are the changes. If members have any questions, I'll hand back to the Chair.
Members, have you got any comments or questions or anything you'd like to add? I don't see anyone. Thank you very much for that, Pamela. I have no urgent items, so that just leaves me to bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Diolch, Bob.
Thanks,
Welcome out. Thank you.